let me just preface all of this by saying I'm feeling about as black-pilled about the Dallas Cowboys prospects for next year as I have been going into any offseason, maybe in like 6 or 7 years, because I always, Cowboys fans famously gas themselves up in the off season and even throughout the season, and we drink our own Kool-Aid and think that, oh, this is the year, that these are all the pieces that you only need to look at the tape from last year before the draft of your program to see me really hoping against hope that all the pieces would kind of fall into place better than they did. So for free agency, you never expect much from Jerry and company because as an organization, they don't really believe in it anymore. Not since they got Deion Sanders from San Francisco to their success which resulted in a Super Bowl. They've never really made any big splash free agency moves that compare to that since. And that was 25 near 30 years ago. So
almost same timeline as they won a Super Bowl, but the Vikings have never won one. I'm sorry. I'll get that bird out of the way right away.
Right. No, I was saving that card for later, but it's good to clear that.
I'm gonna drop that grenade down.
So the Cowboys rarely do much in free agency. They really believe more in home-growing talent, drafting talent, and kind of nurturing it for a long time. That's what they did with Randy Gregory, who they drafted and stuck by him for years and years through legal issues and drug issues and personal, legal stuff, and injuries too. And the team stuck with him, and they announced I think I even texted it to you. They announced, ESPN sent out an alert, that Gregory was re-signing with the Cowboys for this massive contract. And I was like, oh, great, good. Finally, maybe that investment will pay off. And then maybe an hour later, they were tweeting out that he was actually going to the Broncos instead.
Yes.
Which hurt extra. Never really had anything personal against Donkeys fans until I lived in South Dakota, and there's so many of them here, and their sense of self-satisfaction and entitlement, I resent it because they haven't really earned that the way Cowboys fans have. I've just every team hates the Cowboys, and I've just learned to hate some teams more than others. But moving out here, it really hurt to see Gregory going to the Broncos. Especially a team that we're not talking about them, but it feels like their star could be on the rise in the next season. I mean, the AFC West is just wild. We could do a whole episode just talking about the changes going on there. You've dealt with it extensively, especially for the Raiders, but just everything that's going on there signals a sea change. The AFC West and the NFC West just look really good next year. So, meanwhile, Cowboys don't make many moves in free agency. They hemorrhage Randy Gregory. I take that personally. I think it hurts the team from a personnel standpoint because when he was good, he was great, and it's hard to build a player like that in the draft when certain defensive players may have been available during free agency. Stephen Jones was quoted saying Dorrance Armstrong is right there from a production standpoint with Randy Gregory. This was in the last couple of days. I saw on Cowboys Nation, the not Barstool, but on Cowboys blog had Stephen Jones quoted saying that, and that just sounds like more gas. It just sounds like maybe this guy will turn out to be good. And I have some, when we get to potential draft picks for the Cowboys, that position is definitely a high priority in my opinion. Because just every time they had Gregory pass rushing with Micah Parsons this last season,
it was nasty.
Good things happened for the Cowboys. Losing Amari Cooper, losing him for a 5th round pick in this draft and a 6th round pick in next year's draft seems like a really. Oh, sorry, no. Let me get that right. I've got the page cropped here.
It's kind of.
This is not information I know off the top of my head.
That's okay.
Sorry, 5th round and a 6th round pick, both in this year's draft. Those can be put to good use, but I mean, for a guy that produced the way Amari Cooper did and was, I would say, beloved by the fan base, but they definitely supported him. I mean, I saw him play. I saw how the fans cheered for him in Dallas in the last, the last game of the season against Arizona, which I was personally there for, much to my delight and chagrin. I think Cooper was always well liked. But there were a lot of times when he didn't show up in away games. Especially outdoor away games. There were a couple late season games against Philly that I can think of that at least one of them was the kind of the deciding factor in whether or not we went to the playoffs that year. And he kind of sat the end of that one out. And it wasn't the only time he did it. So he was a hard-working guy, an intelligent dude, like a good team player and everything, except for kind of some crucial moments. He just not just didn't show up, but he like refused to go out on the field for whatever reason. So maybe that's not as great a loss. He's going to Cleveland too. I don't see anyone, going to Cleveland and spinning straw into gold over there.
Deshaun Watson, though, the thing about that is that Deshaun Watson doesn't have to. If he's not suspended for as many games as I think he's going to be, I don't know. It could be nasty. It could be. I don't
know that he's going to play this season. And I think of a big what if is whether or not Deshaun Watson is starting at quarterback, and if he does, for what portion of the season. You could have a situation like Ezekiel Elliott did 2-3 seasons ago, where he played the first 4 games of the season because they managed to take it into arbitration or, hold it up in court. And then the league just said, no, you got to do the rest of the suspension. So that there's all sorts of things at play with that are going to have a ripple effect throughout the league. I can't say I wish bad things for Amari Cooper, because I do like him a lot, like as a player, and even when he played for the Raiders, I liked him, and which is rare for me to like an Alabama player as much as I've liked Amari Cooper, but he just is a good dude, and it sucks to see him go. But as I will address later, I don't think that's as detrimental a loss to the team as Randy Gregory is. Although, like with Randy Gregory, there's a younger player, the current holder of number 88, once worn by Drew Pearson, Hall of Famer Drew Pearson, once worn by Hall of Famer Michael Irvin, once worn by Des Bryant, and now CeeDee Lamb. I think with Amari out of the picture and Gallup in there as the 2 receiver, and then potential other changes that might happen at receiver, which we'll talk about, I feel like it could be a net positive. And again, this is me hoping against hope that Lamb will step into that role. That's kind of, it's big shoes to fill. It's a big jersey number to fill when you're number 88 for the Cowboys. Especially when kind of every other piece of your offense, or most of them, are kind of settled, at least in the quarterback department. Cedric Wilson, though, losing Cedric Wilson and losing Connor Williams and La'el Collins, like Cedric Wilson had a lot of clutch catches this year.
Yes, he did. Really an unsung hero in my mind, if you think about it.
I agree. I have a special cheer for each player. I make a joke to my fiance every time, a certain player does a certain thing. Well, every time Dalton Schultz makes a catch, I go, Schultz! It's just how I entertain myself. And Wilson, I had a Wilson! And it happened a lot of times this season, especially when either Lamb was out of the game or Cooper wasn't present in the game, as was often the case. So that feels like a significant loss. And then the line, losing Connor Williams and Lyle Collins. Cowboys went from being the best O-line in the league to being one of the top ones to now the most penalized. Were they the most penalized O-line last season? I believe they were. If they weren't, they were in the top 3. Mm-hmm. So, as the O-line goes, the rest of the offense goes, and it doesn't matter how many Pro Bowl players you put at the skill positions if you don't have protection from the quarterback. For the quarterback, if you don't have ability to create a pocket and create plays, especially with the way Dak Prescott is playing more now post-injury, he's more of a pocket passer than a scrambler like he was. Although all great Cowboys quarterbacks kind of have to have that scrambling ability at a certain point. And he showed it off last year, but you can still tell that they're trying to change his game, have him become more comfortable staying in the pocket and throwing. So not having those veterans on the O-line was a big loss. So to just sum up free agency, it was just hemorrhaging good to great players that were such a massive part of the team's identity and just their when they're at their best, a lot of these players are who you see involved in the plays. Especially Williams and Collins. It's rough. And although I assume Williams must be pretty close to the end of his career anyway, because he's going to Miami, which is where players go to retire, and still pick up a check for a couple of years. I know that's true of the Cowboys too. A lot of washed up veterans come there, but those are the two teams. The winners are nicer in Miami, so players prefer to spend their last couple seasons, if possible, collecting a check or check down there.
Oh, and you don't blame them. I will say though, there's a couple of other players that I really want to get your perspective on because, now they made a couple of good re-signings. Guys like Leighton Van Der Resch. I feel like he's still kind of I'm waiting for him to unlock a little something more, Leighton Van Der Resch, because we saw what Micah Parsons did, completely changed this defense in 1 year. Just all of a sudden, he's the cat's pajamas. He's on the field. Bad things tend to happen for opposing teams. Now, Leighton Van Der Resch, I'm left wanting more. And I know he's only 26, so he's got some time to kind of work through this a little bit. But at the same time, you bring back Dante Fowler, or you bring in Dante Fowler, to kind of help with some of that edge help. But even guys like Dorrance Armstrong, I think they can still do some things. But I think a player that I would like to kind of get your perspective on, because he was a former Viking, and I don't get me wrong, I love Jayron Kearse, but he's one of those guys that he's a lot like Cedric Wilson in that regard. He goes unsung, but you cannot measure this man's impact he has on defense because, he's that big type corner, 6'4", 217. And every time I see him, he is making a play on a tight end or on, in the backfield or whatever it is. I mean, guy had a 76.8 PFF grade, had a couple of interceptions. I believe he had 90 tackles or something, or 80 tackles off the top of my head. A former 7th round pick out of Clemson, and he's just, in my mind, he's a really unsung hero. So, I mean, even what about the resigning aspect? Hemorrhaging, yes, on certain positions, but bringing back guys like Leighton Van Der Resch and Jayron Kearse, you had to be kind of happy to see that.
No, I was. Van Der Resch, I like a lot. Kearse was in on a lot of plays where he wasn't necessarily the guy that got credited with how that play went on the defense, but he's all over the field. Those were good re-signings. I focus mostly on the negative this offseason just because I'm strangely focused on the pass rush, and because I'm afraid that I'm afraid of going back to just like, well, I mean, not even going back, because really that playoff game against San Francisco felt like the regular Cowboys defense that we were used to seeing, where it was just porous and people ran through it. And a lot of that was where certain players were assigned during the game. Some of that was the fact that the 49ers O-line held on every play, and it just wasn't called until the fourth quarter, when it almost didn't matter anymore. Excuse me. So, no, I think those are good re-signings. I'm loath to even say it out loud, but I have a fear of injury when it comes to Van Der Esch, because he throws himself right into the game. I'm blanking on who kind of the most prominent Cowboys. Well, yeah, it's shades of Sean Lee, which is like, oh man, this guy's good. And he throws himself on a grenade on every play, and eventually he just blows up his body, and he can't be effective down the stretch or in the playoffs. And so that's, and I think that's a legitimate fear, because he was injured for a couple of games this season.
Yeah, there were at least a few. I'm blanking on exactly how many, but I feel like he, when the Cowboys drafted him a couple years ago, I was thinking, okay, there's going to be a guy that sticks around for a long time. But I had 77 total tackles. I believe he missed a couple of games as well this year, or at least one. But I mean, again, you were left wanting more at the end of the day. But overall, he's still a solid linebacker.